Welcome, everybody. We have a great turnout today. My name is Susan Batt, representing Arts and Culture San Diego, and we'd like to welcome you to our final public forum focusing on arts and culture. We've had one forum for each council position being elected this year, and we'd like to thank everyone who has attended any or all of our forums. Thanks also to the arts and culture groups for making this happen. Balboa Park Cultural Partnership, the San Diego Regional Arts and Culture Coalition, and Arts and Culture San Diego. The core questions we're asking are the same questions for candidates across the city. May I introduce your other two representatives, Lauren Garcia and Diona Bustos. Lauren, would you like to introduce yourself?
Absolutely, and I'm very appreciative to be here. My name is Lauren Garcia. I am the fair director for the Linda Vista Multicultural Fair and Parade. It's been going for 35 years now, and it's the largest multicultural celebration in the Linda Vista area, and all free to the community. Along with that, I work with a few nonprofits through event production with my company, Social Artistry. And I'm happy to pass it over to Diana.
Thank you, Lauren. Hi, everyone. My name is Diona Bustos. I am the Director of Services for Pacific Southwest Community Development Corporation. We are a nonprofit affordable housing developer. We develop low-income affordable housing throughout the state of California, and we also have a senior facility in District 7, Versa at Zavita. It is a 55-plus senior community that we've helped develop and where we also provide residential services. Back to you, Susan.
Thanks, Diana. And as I mentioned, I'm Susan Batt, representing Arts and Culture San Diego, and I've worked in Balboa Park for almost 20 years. I'm also a resident of District 7. Currently, I manage the Community Access Pass and Military Appreciation Pass programs, both of which provide free annual Balboa Park Explorer Passes to families in our communities. These programs seek to expand opportunities for many more interested families and individuals to experience arts and culture in Balboa Park by eliminating the cost of admission to the museums. Countless District 7 organizations and individuals have been consistent participants of both programs, and in particular, the Military Appreciation Pass program has benefited from widespread distribution throughout the district, covering all the neighborhood zip codes. So let's get to our forum and welcome Raul Campillo. Thank you for participating in our forum. We have a number of attendees from arts and culture organizations in District 7 and many from around the city. Raul, please take up to 5 minutes before we start our questions. What would you like to tell everyone about yourself and why are you running?
Absolutely. Well, thank you all for having me very much. We're 33 days away from the election. It's a really exciting time. And I just want to say that the discussion on arts and science and culture in our community is not had enough, especially during COVID when public health is at the forefront of everybody's mind. Economics, social justice, all these sorts of things overlap with arts and culture. So I'm really appreciative of you holding these forums so that everyone can listen in on their candidates and understanding the issues. A little bit about me. I grew up in East County, San Diego, in El Cajon. I went to Uni High School in Linda Vista. It used to be there. Now it's no longer there. That's now Cathedral Catholic High School up in Del Mar. But I was the last graduating class of Uni High School before attending Harvard. Studied government, was involved in numerous campaigns as a field organizer and intern and different levels on the East Coast. I was then a public school teacher for a few years in North Las Vegas and was getting my master's degree at night while teaching 5th grade during the day. After a few years being a teacher, I returned to Harvard for law school and was involved in political campaigns throughout all those times, and then made my way to a law firm in Los Angeles where I was doing a lot of corporate civil litigation, but was always emphasizing my pro bono practice as well. And all of that was building into the time when I knew I was going to move home to serve the city of San Diego. I had always envisioned myself coming home to be an attorney in one capacity or another, and luckily I'm now a deputy city attorney with the city attorney's office under Mara Elliott. I work in the criminal division, had time as a prosecutor doing general trials, and working now on the gun violence response unit, where we obtain gun violence restraining orders, especially during COVID. The issues of our social cohesion, issues of domestic violence, drug abuse, suicide, all these sorts of things are really spiking. And so my team was very, very busy as COVID hit, to make sure that people who had access to guns and were committing threats or domestic abuse or saying they were going to harm themselves, that we could work with the police department to get guns out of the situation. So I'm very proud of our successes in that office and in that unit. One of the key things that I've really brought to the campaign, it really comes from my experience with my older brother, Alex. He passed away 6 years ago now from an opioid overdose. And when I was looking for jobs in San Diego, I knew that working at the city attorney's office was really where I needed to be, because Mara Elliott explained to me the therapy and the diversion programs that they help defendants get into so that they can avoid incarceration, so that they can get the help they really need, because we know that people being in jail doesn't really help solve their issues. And so it was with that in mind and that in my heart that I took that job at the city attorney's office, and I'm proud of the work that we do there on all those fronts to really help people. And in the gun violence response unit, part of what we do too is making sure that while we get guns out of a toxic situation, that we encourage people to get therapy and push them in that direction, so that they really help their families get at the root causes. The last thing I'd say is, the issues facing District 7 are the same districts facing, are the same issues facing every other district. Some people might not realize that even in one of the more affluent parts of District 7, Tierra Santa, it also has the second poorest census tract in the entire district is actually in Tierra Santa. So whether seems to be affluence, there's people struggling. And so just knocking on 35,000 to 40,000 doors in the primary for my team, me 6,000 personally, and now all the phone calls we've done during COVID for the campaign, really getting at the heart of what people are suffering, how hard they're struggling and their families are struggling through all these things, no matter what neighborhood they live in. I'd say that knocking in Del Cerro, which is a more affluent community, is where I actually talked to most people, more people than in any other part of the district, that said that they had families that were dealing with drug abuse and opioid abuse issues as well. So I really think that what I bring different to the race is really understanding how all our families are interconnected by these problems, and the specific experience from my job working as a deputy city attorney to address these human issues is really what sets me apart. But obviously those things are not directly in line with what we're about to talk with today about arts and culture, but I've made sure to bring up arts and culture at the door. When people ask me what my big plan is when it comes to what I want to see done as a deputy or as a city councilor, I mention a seriously transformative plan for District 7 along the river that would include arts and culture, environmentalism, commerce, public transport, all those things together. And I'll explain that during a question later. But essentially connecting the 4 different trails along the river to make a mega trail similar to what we see in New York and in Miami being built right now. So I'm excited, and I have big thoughts on how arts and culture can transform District 7. And so with that, I'm really just proud to be in the runoff, coming up close, hopefully, to victory, and I'm eager to take your questions.
Fantastic. Thank you, Raul. Well, let's get straight into the questions. Attendees at our first forum submitted a number of these questions ahead of time, and we are asking all candidates, and we've asked our attendees today to add questions to the Q&A during the forum. Lauren, will you kick us off?
Absolutely. Thanks, Susan. Raul, arts and culture organizations are essentially small businesses. And like all small businesses, they've been hit hard by the COVID-19 pandemic. Unlike for-profit businesses, however, they were unable to access the city's recent small business recovery funding. When we emerge from this pandemic, we are likely to see a devastated or severely hobbled arts and culture sector. There are immediate and longer-term recovery needs. Would you support city investment or a special recovery fund to assist the arts, culture, and creativity sector's recovery during the COVID-19 shutdown and future reopening, and ensure that any funding or recovery plan for small businesses includes nonprofit organizations?
Yes, absolutely. We know at many different forums we're asked what more could be done for small business, and you make a great point that nonprofits, especially related to arts and culture, are really helping families make ends meet and providing a very important community service, whether it's through music or fine art, theater or any other number of history, all the different things that come from this sector of our economy. And it was a incredible shortcoming of the $6.2 million fund. That was a good start, but we have to keep in mind that 96,000 small businesses are in San Diego. That I believe it's 67% of all employees in the city of San Diego are through small businesses. And so now I say to myself, that's even more amplified by the fact that it leaves out nonprofits. So it really was not economically sensible to leave out arts and culture nonprofits from that system. I think that is something that has to be opened up. I think we have to, hopefully be getting federal assistance. Who knows when? Hopefully soon. The government might shut itself down. It has a shutdown threat, and maybe some part of that will be city assistance. But if we get money to the city that comes from more federal funding to help small business, we have to say that part of that definition is arts and culture nonprofits. It's something that can't be left out. There's so many families that their mothers and fathers or themselves are part of that sector, and it makes no sense that they were left out. I understand the idea of wanting to help small businesses, but for profit, nonprofit, there shouldn't have been that distinction because of the actual people we're trying to help, which is the individual citizens, by helping them meet their their bills, make ends meet. They shouldn't have been left out.
Thank you, Raul. Diana, you have a very popular question from the attendees regarding capital reinvestment.
I do, Susan. Raul, the city owns a number of arts and cultural facilities across the city. Among them, downtown theaters, Liberty Station buildings, and of course, Balboa Park. Many of these facilities have significant deferred maintenance, and their surrounding infrastructure is badly underfunded. Do you support and will you commit to pushing for the creation of a viable action plan to fund Balboa Park deferred maintenance, infrastructure and facilities, as well as increased support for city-owned cultural assets across the city?
Yes, I think that it's beyond time that we reinvest in this sort of infrastructure of our arts and culture centers, and Balboa Park in particular. It's trying to find the sources of funding for that is obviously the more difficult question. And this isn't a policy that I'm willing to go to the ends of the world to meet. But I wonder to myself, and I know it's controversial because a lot of people really appreciate the free parking at Balboa Park because it allows for access to many individuals regardless of your income status. And so I've always wondered, with 12 parking lots, with so many visitors, I think I read earlier when I was doing research on Balboa Park that we have between 12 and 15 million visitors to Balboa Park on an annual basis. Is that right? That sounds about right to me. I know I'm one of them. I'm wondering why there can't be a minimal parking fee simply to be able to collect money to refurbish aspects over the course of time. I know that we rely a lot on the TOT to get our penny for the arts, but that is, when that suffers, then that penny for the arts suffers. But I'm committed to the penny for the arts. Don't get me wrong, but it doesn't seem to be as predictable as we need it to be. But we do know that people are going to be parking in Balboa Park. So if it costs simply $1 to park in Balboa Park, would that be limiting? I think that we have to think of creative, but very, very affordable mechanisms so that we can guarantee that there is money coming in to reuse on infrastructure. And I know that's not a popular position with a lot of people because it's been free for so long. In fact, it might even be, I'm not sure if it's part of the city charter that it needs, and maybe so we'd have to let the voters make a decision on that. But with 12 parking lots for Balboa Park, I think that one aspect of that is if a person didn't want to pay $1, it would encourage them to take the bus or public transportation to get to Balboa Park if they didn't want to pay that. But ultimately, I think $1 per parking space for the whole day. Not we're not charging them on an hourly basis, but how many millions of dollars would we be able to raise to be able to refurbish some of our gardens and reinforce some of the existing structures that we know are falling down, and repaint, take lead out of aspects of the architecture. You know, there's so many different things that we need to address. It's so vast. So I'm trying to find small little things like that, but I know we got to be creative.
Thank you, Raul. Here's another popular question. Lauren, will you take that one?
Yes, and I'm sure many of us on the call are glad you mentioned the penny for the arts. As you may know, 4 cents of every dollar of TOT raised by the city is dedicated to promotion of the city. In 2012, the City Council passed a resolution called Penny for the Arts, which promised 1 cent of that 4 cent portion would go towards funding support for arts and culture programs and institutions. To date, however, funding for arts and culture has fallen far short of that goal, and every year we are forced to engage in fierce advocacy to secure even a fraction of the promised funding. Do you support fully funding the Penny for Arts and Culture plan, which is 9.52% of TOT? And would you support an ordinance that clearly defines a maximum 4-year phased-in timeline and makes it a certain part of the budget process rather than being treated as a loose guideline?
Absolutely. I think that not only, let's talk about that ordinance for a second. That ordinance has to have teeth. It has to say that if we don't meet it, that the city has a liability against it, such that an outside attorney could sue the city for not meeting that budgetary need. That is the way in which you get governments to actually meet the promises they make to voters. And so if we're going to pass an ordinance, we have to say, if we don't meet the requirement of that, 4 cents for every dollar, if we don't meet our 9%, what was it, 9 point, what'd you say it was, 9.3%? If we're not meeting that, outside nonprofit attorney should be able to take the city to court to say, hey, you're not fully funding this, and you've promised us that this would be done. Only then will the city council really, make sure it's there. Oftentimes political actors only move when they know litigation is coming. So that's really the way to make sure a city takes it seriously. And I, as a lawyer, am very familiar with how, there's going to be a lot of people lining up to take the city to court to do that. Make it a mandatory requirement. Mandatory requirement. That's a redundancy. Just make it mandatory or a requirement.
That's a great suggestion you have, and I'm sure many people on the call would love to continue that conversation. So Raul, will you commit to always including achieving and maintaining Penny for the Arts and Culture as a top priority in all budget discussions and initial and revised budget memorandums?
Yes, and yes, I will. And just to make it simply brief on that, it's not just important to the economy that we make sure that the people who are in the arts are able to make a living because the city is going to spend that money appropriately and as we promise. It's really important to maintaining our social cohesion as a city. There's so many aspects of the city of San Diego that I've learned about. I mean, I grew up here, came home here for every single holiday, did internships here during college, during law school. And it was only on the campaign trail that I actually learned about so many different cultural aspects that people are not exposed to. And because of groups like yours, bringing them to my attention. And so it really does diminish the experience of San Diegans living here and all of San Diego County even, to not have leaders who put this as a budget memo priority. It's going to be one of mine.
Thank you, Raul. Current events have been an influence on a number of the questions we received. Diana, your next question, please.
Thank you, Susan. Raul, San Diego has an incredibly diverse, culturally and historically rich arts and cultural community, but it lacks the level of engagement and support from the city that many other world-class cities have enjoyed. Right now, there's an effort to create planning and engagement from the city to foster the strength of the arts, culture, and creative community through a cultural plan and a cultural affairs department that would ensure planning is implemented. Do you support the creation of a cultural affairs department and the development of a citywide cultural plan that would elevate arts and culture as an industry critical to economic health and quality of life in San Diego?
I do, and that's partly because I see the synergy that we can have between other industries with arts and culture. So first of all, if we want to elevate this to the level it deserves to be, we're going to need to build more buildings. We're going to have to build proper exhibition spaces for the arts. And so that's jobs created for construction. That's jobs created for development. That improves housing values because we know that people want to have quick and easy access to art. And it improves our educational system as well by creating more opportunities. So yes, this has a positive impact across all aspects of our city, economically and socially. And this, I think this is a good aspect where I think that an office like this would help put my idea of the river park, a 10-mile wide long river park, into action, because we know that if you go all the way towards the Mission, east of the stadium, along the river, along the Green Line trolley line, past what's going to be SDSU West, into Mission Valley, past Fashion Valley, and then all the way to Dog Beach and OB, we know we have 4 trails there that are all separated because of issues of flooding and because of issues of development. Right now, a lot of them have small homeless encampments, and a lot of individual homeless people living there. So what we really need to do is say, hey, this is something that like Manhattan did in the mid 2000s, where it took the High Line, which was an abandoned urban elevated rail line, and they turned it into an economic and arts and culture space where people could walk along. And so many people who visit Manhattan use the High Line. Right now, Miami's doing the same thing with what's called the Underline, the main pike that goes from outside Miami down right into Brickell. It's been a bike space, but not developed and not appropriately used. And what's funny enough is that one of my best friends from law school is actually the pro bono counsel for that. And I've been asking him about the pitfalls that parks and extended walkways like that face. And so I'm starting to think ahead of already what we're going to have to deal with. But imagine if we used water bond money from the San Diego River Conservancy to reshape the river so that there's less floods, level the space, pull the weeds, aerate the water, because we know there's too much bacteria in the water because there's not enough oxygen in the water, and that's why a lot of it smells. And then we can create amphitheaters. We can create exhibits for Kumeyaay Indians near the Mission. Imagine when you're walking past Morena and you're going under PCH, imagine seeing a Black Lives Matter and a Chicano history and an Asian American history murals along the giant pillars that hold up the freeway and PCH right there. That's something that an arts and cultural affairs department would be at the forefront of bringing to District 7. And I really want to see that done. And it's not my original idea, but when I saw that, I said, I have a friend working on it in Miami, and I've really enjoyed the one when I lived in Manhattan, seeing it there. Let's bring something similar to San Diego.
Thank you, Raul. I can't believe we're running out of time so quickly. There is one further question I'd like to address, a structural one for the city, before we see if we can fit in another question from the attendees watching today.
Sure.
Lauren, will you take the next question?
Sure. Raul, as part of the mayor's commitment to a city that works for all, the commission has made great strides to ensure that the resources it manages are distributed in an equitable manner. To support this, the commission has launched a diversity, equity, and inclusion assessment, a 3-part initiative to assess our successes and deficits and ensure that the commission is equipped to provide public sector work within the city's diverse communities. How would you work with the commission to ensure that access, equity, and diversity remain a priority for all neighborhoods?
Sure. So, it's a fundamental failing when affluent families are able to take part in the cultural richness of San Diego, and those who are not affluent are left out. What I see as key problems to that is a lack of space, a lack of access, both in person and virtually, and lack of transport to places where families will be able to engage with our arts and culture scene. So for me, what I really think is important to make this into a reality so that we do have diverse artists being brought in, as well as all communities accessing it, is something like a municipal broadband system that makes internet affordability a reality. It's an expensive investment up front, but other cities do it, and over the course of time save lots of money by not paying private company service providers for their internet. It also means that the city would be able to make sure that families that are struggling for internet access would be able to meet it, because it's really difficult to get subsidized internet through private providers. You have to have a lot of documentation and meet certain requirements, and it's very complicated. But then the transport is the last absolutely critical thing. So I would want to see that first, let's emphasize building arts and culture spaces around public transport so that people can get to them easily. And then where we have them not close to public transport, making sure, right now during COVID, MTS is running the smaller shuttles for people who really need it anywhere in the county for $5, was my understanding from a friend of mine who's blind. She uses that to get around for very cheaply all around the county. I'm saying, okay, let's look at how that can be accessible to be able to get from one part of San Diego to another to be able to access art spaces. I think that would improve not the access for them, but it's going to, raise the name recognition and raise the audiences for our artists so that they can expand their careers and really be known all across San Diego.
Thank you. Looks like we have time for one more question from each of our panelists. So Lauren, would you ask your next question that was part of the Q&A?
Sure. We have a great question from John Bolthouse. How do you envision improving and expanding public awareness of Balboa Park's many needs? Do you believe that the citizens of SD truly understand and appreciate the role that they play in the health and future of the park?
Sure. Thank you, John, for this question. I think for so long, Balboa Park has been really at the core of news stories and plans to really expand it, make it better in so many different ways, improve it. It's almost hard to believe that so many San Diegans don't understand that it needs to be improved. And so you're asking me, how do I envision improving, expanding public awareness? It's hard to answer that question because it's been just at the forefront of the public mind for so long. How many city councilors, how many mayors have we had that say we're gonna redo Balboa Park and get it completed, get it corrected, take back some of the land that should be parkland? That it's a very hard question to know, John. But what I'd say is, do I believe that the citizens of San Diego truly appreciate the role they play in the health and future of the park? They obviously do not know that they play such a key role, because if the citizens of San Diego had been making hundreds and thousands of calls to the mayor's office and to the city councilors and had been showing up and making 4,000 phone calls during a city council meeting, then I think it would get done. So I think you make a good point. It's part of that is I think that a lot of people who don't live in District 3 might not see it the same way as the people who do live in District 3. But I think it's time to get past that thinking. This upcoming race, we have 5 brand new city councilors coming in, and because I've spent so much time with them on the campaign trail, going to all the same meetings and being in part of the same forums, I think we're going to have a different mindset of city councilor coming in. So I know that me and the other 4 winners of the city council races coming up really do care about it and are dedicated to making sure that people know that they have to be really engaged in the conversation, even if they don't live in District 3, to get it done. So I'm committed to that, and I think that we can get that done. That's a hard question.
Thank you, Raul. We have another question from, this one's from Victoria Hamilton. City council members recommended Arts Commission appointments. Please describe your ideal candidate.
Ideal candidate for an appointee to the Arts Commission?
Yes.
First, I'm going to look for someone from District 7 who has been more than just been involved, but someone who has made a career out of public service connected to the arts, right? So that just has to be a baseline so that there's expertise in the role. But I'm going to turn to groups like the Balboa Park Cultural Partnership and the coalition that's holding this today and say, what are the characteristics you're looking for? I'm not an arts expert, but I know that there's people I can turn to and say, hey, let's vet this candidate together. One of the things that I've envisioned for all commissions is setting up sort of an informal vetting unit for my office on people who will be appointed to various commissions. But ideally, this is going to be someone who has shown a career length dedication and expertise. And that doesn't mean this person has to have 30 years experience. They might have only 5 years of experience, but that is what they are dedicated to. I just want to make sure that, people who are well politically connected aren't just the ones who are getting these in. That's why you have to have a committee who runs through a whole set of names and says, this person's really well connected, but this person over here is bringing a voice that hasn't been heard before and often gets neglected. So, fresh blood is always part of it. I mean, if I'm elected, I'm going to be the youngest city councilor at 33 years old. In fact, I turned 33 in 3 days. So I'm looking for people who can bring a lot of energy. That's not a deal breaker, but what I mean to say is I'm just not excluding someone who's only had a few years in it, as long as they've shown that dedication to it.
Thank you, Raul. Well, I'm sure everyone would like us to continue much longer, but we're running up against the clock. Raul, having heard the questions today, and in case you wanted to say anything else at this point, the floor is yours for up to 5 minutes.
I just remember growing up and, going to the Air and Space Museum, Museum of Man. Now it's now renamed, right? The Museum of Museum of All of Us. Is that the new name? Something that's close to that, right? And going to the zoo. But the thing that I really appreciate is just how so many young people from all over San Diego come to Balboa Park and enjoy the arts and culture, and they shouldn't have to drive from 35, 40 minutes away to really have access to that. It seems to me that we're missing opportunities to have them in the far east part of San Diego and San Carlos and far north in San Dieguito. We have to say to ourselves, every neighborhood should have connections to arts and culture. And that's where groups like yours and coalitions like yours are going to instruct me and say, hey, there's a parcel of land that the city owns that's being underutilized. Let's set it aside for arts and culture, and really make it easy so that, working families can access that on a weekday or a weekend, and not just, 1 or 2 field trips a year. Make it part of our daily lives. That was one of the great things that I loved about living in Boston and living in New York, was that everywhere you turn, there is arts and culture. Part of that is that they are just much older cities, but we know that San Diego's arts funding is such a low percentage, a low per capita amount relative to other cities. I think we need to really look at it and say, per capita, let's break it down. How much is being spent on all these different things? And then I think we'll find that it's really just unacceptable how low it is for arts and culture. I like to think in terms of that thing. How much of your, $1 per person, how many cents are we spending per person? And I'm sure it's less than 1 cent per person, for San Diegan, for arts and culture. But I'm dedicated to analyzing it very closely, finding the neighborhoods we do it, because I know that my childhood was really improved by access that I was lucky to have coming into the city of San Diego from El Cajon. And we need to make it more spread out. We're going to improve Balboa Park. Don't get me wrong. That's a huge goal of mine. But I really want to see District 7 have a really long, extended 10-mile river park that will have amphitheaters and poetry readings and mini libraries and free internet access all along public transit, and really see us all come together around these arts and cultural installations that improve our city and improve the reputation of our city as well.
Raul Campillo, thank you so much for your time today. And thanks also to our panelists, Lauren and Diana, and to all of you for your questions today. This is the end of our final candidate forum for 2020. Thank you again for attending today, and we hope everyone has a great evening.